we're on time now to move on to the panel. Bex, my ASC committee friend here, will be chairing the session. And we've got three fantastic panelists to join on these amazing chairs. This session is called The Way Ahead. So we've got Rebecca. Mel Courtright is joining us again from this morning's session. We're joined by Stephen Hughes from PureSpectrum and Judith from ESOMAR. So over to you, Bex.
Thank you. Yes, welcome to the final session, which is a tricky slot for two reasons. Firstly, we're the people stood between them and the bar, and secondly, because we had to follow John Paulston, and no one ever wants to do that, but we will do our best. Yes, not fair. So as JT said, what we're going to try and do is kind of pull the data together, but look at, a bit more to the future, and when we all leave here tomorrow, what should we be doing as practitioners, as organizations, as a wider sector. So JT gave some very, very quick instructions. Oh, sorry, we'd like this to be an interactive panel. So if you have any questions as we go along, or if you just want to chip in with thoughts or anything, don't feel as you have to wait until the end. Just stick a hand up and I'll try and keep an eye out. So do join in. I've got lots of friends in the audience, so I'll just pick on you if no one does. So yes, very, very quick intros there. But firstly, let's just ask each of you to do a bit of a broader intro and why this issue around data quality is important to you professionally and why you're here talking to us today. Judith, let's start with you.
So I'm Judith Passingham. I've worked in the market research industry for over 40 years, as surprising that may seem, and in some large agencies. I'm now chair of the Professional Standards Committee for ESOMAR. It's important to me because I believe in the market research industry, and I see something here that sort of is damaging its credibility, frankly, amongst clients. And I've heard clients talk about this, and I'm very concerned, and I'm very keen to play a role through the Professional Standards Committee of trying to address it, or acknowledging that it's very challenging.
Thank you. Stephen?
So I'm Stephen. I'm the European Managing Director for PureSpectrum. We are an American-owned sample marketplace res tech company. I've been in the industry only for 20 years, so probably more than most of the people here. It's important to me, I think, because I think Nick and Louise said it really well, that without good data, we don't really have anything. And Judith and I were talking this morning, and Judith was talking about the lack of confidence that clients are talking about within the industry. So we actually use the word existential, or the phrase existential threat, and I've heard that a few times today. So it's something that is crucial, I think, for all of us.
Thank you. And Mel, who we're really making you earn your lunch with us today.
Melanie Courtright, CEO of the Insights Association. I've only been in this role about 3.5 years, though, actually. Before that, I spent, 25 years in the practice of research. I've always cared about research quality. It's been just a part of the brand of Melanie. I want to lay my head on my pillow at night and think, yeah, we did good work. In my current role, though, more importantly, our role is to protect the profession, and we feel like that there is a real threat right now with some of the language going on. So want to be a part of crafting a solution.
Thank you. So we've had a lot of really great presentations today, a lot of really good advice. We know that this is a huge issue, and it's not simple, and it's not that there is one silver bullet we can give people to solve it. But I'd really like each of your viewpoints on, if we want to just give everyone today one key takeaway, one piece of advice that you would give them when they leave us today to try and start making inroads, what piece of advice would you give them? Stephen, we'll go to you first.
So I think there's two aspects. I think we could probably, I know you said one, but I'm just going to quickly discard one very quickly. I think if we look at the talks today, I think if we really boil it down, when it comes to bad data, there's unengaged respondents, and then there's fraudulent respondents. So I think when it comes to unengaged, everything John said, that's I think the perfect response. I think obviously there's responsibility for all the researchers in the room to be bringing that on board. However, I should also say that I've been in conferences for 15 years ago, and everybody was talking about the importance of keeping surveys and engaged. So I'm a little well, we'll see. We'll see if that comes to fruition. On the fraudulent side of it, I'm quite surprised. I thought today everybody would be running around with their hair on fire talking about the advent of AI and the impact that would have on fraud. So when it comes to fraudulent activity, I think obviously this is a problem created by technology, but I think the answer to bad technology is better, good technology to counteract that.
It's technology is often quite both the villain and the hero, right, of the piece.
Indeed.
Judith.
Well, I don't like the one thing because I think it's a very complex situation, and sort of and it's risen up through a number of but the way that the market has changed, the way that the supply chain has changed, has led to this situation. I think in some respects. It's a complex topic, and I think the first thing that people need to do is to try and master the topic, to try and understand it. So I think the work that the Insights Association have done to get a consistent vocabulary and to try and distinguish between different kinds of behaviour. Not all respondents are fraudulent. I take surveys quite regularly, and sort of as everyone said, some of them are quite tedious. You can see what's wrong. Does that make me a fraudulent participant if I put X in the box? And so on. So I'd say that a mastery of the topic is the one thing to start, and there are other things that hopefully we'll talk about in a minute.
Mel.
I've had a lot of great conversations with many of you, a lot of great ideas, and each one of you have different ideas, different expertise. So for me, it would be if everyone in this room left this room and did one thing tomorrow to make a difference in their area of expertise. Before you knew it, we'd have a much better ecosystem going on. If Cint went and did everything they were going to do with Ghost Completes, immediately we'd have a better ecosystem. If everyone in this room got uncomfortable, we have an issue with inertia, right? And even with our surveys, if we're honest, the way we really write surveys is we pick up the survey we ran 2 weeks ago and we just modify it, even though it was a crappy survey, because it's fast, it's expedient, and it's comfortable. But so we need to force ourselves to be uncomfortable, and everyone in this room stop with the inertia and do one thing next week that's going to make a difference in the data quality. And if we keep doing that and we collaborate and share what we did with each other, we really are some of the smartest people in the world. We can do this. We just have to make it a priority.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that leads into I want to just touch on, we're here because we want to try and solve this problem. But if we look at, Arno's presentation earlier, John has just touched on it, Steve, you touched on it. When it comes to that issue around bad data quality because the respondent is disengaged, etc., we have been talking about that for an awfully long time. I feel like we do know what we should be doing. But John has still been talking about this. If we know, and I'll throw this over to him, if we know what we should be doing, but we still aren't doing it, why aren't we doing it? Anyone got any thoughts on why? We all know we shouldn't be doing 30-minute surveys. We should be testing it on a mobile ray, but not everyone, but a lot of time it's not happening.
So I think, again, it's quite a complex question. And sort of one of my colleagues on the Professional Standards Committee, Kathy Frankovic, who's a brilliant researcher, observed to me that sort of nobody was really writing any papers or learned documents about how to design a questionnaire for the last 20 years. And yet, if you go back, there was tons of stuff. And sort of, I think John probably is the only example I can think of who's got a very strong view about this. We've got stuff about going on mobile, device agnostic, that sort of thing. But it's sort of directional. It's not superficial, but it's not really about questionnaire design. And when people started putting questionnaires into the online environment, probably they didn't change very much. Had these Hughes batteries and brand trackers and everybody trying to squeeze them in. So that this discipline of online questions didn't emerge. So maybe what we need to do is actually to restart that by sort of what works, what doesn't work. And we're in a more competitive environment now because we're in competition with the internet. So all these different things. So it's very fast moving. So maybe we need to get that sort of, intellectual part of our industry back and say we want to understand what's working, what's engaging respondents, participants, sharing knowledge, know-how, that sort of thing, because it's kind of evaporated. So I don't know why. the other observation I make here is nobody stands up and says the work I did was crap. You know, people, human behaviour. So sort of it's very hard for people to say, I've done bad work, I'm going to improve it. So you've got all these factors coming into play.
I think we're not making progress because we're not collaborating. Everybody will go from this room and then they'll want to make a difference, but there'll be one person back in their office. You know, we're not collaborating both across and up and down the supply cycle. We're not collaborating with each other as panel companies or as agencies, and then we're not collaborating, you know, buyer to agency to panel supplier to incentive. The problem that they talked about, one of the presentations talked about earlier, the supply chain. So there's just no collaboration. So when that ecosystem exists, if and you go in and you say you shouldn't be doing this way, and they say, says who? Well, there's no standard that says how it should be done. There's no, you know, there's maybe a few best practices, and somebody else will go do it for them that way. And so, you know, you feel alone in the battle to improve quality because we're not collaborating as a profession. That's my opinion.
And Stephen, from your perspective, you know, is another element of this, why are we not doing it? Is it because it is more expensive to do it? And, you know, there is this drive on price, you know, from clients. Does that have an impact?
Well, this is quite a difficult one for me to answer because I've never been on the agency side. I've always been a supplier to the industry. My feel, though, from conversations I have with our clients, is the pressure is really coming from their client. They don't want to change. This is how they've done it. And ultimately, I think it's kind of been touched on today. You know, the value of the respondent seems to get lost in the whole process. And it's, you know, from a sample provision perspective, it is very easy to look at numbers on the screen. You do always have to remind yourself, as we've spoken about today, that they are human beings. So, you know, they have intrinsic value. But I think again, I could be going out on a limb here, but I think it's important for you guys to be pushing back against brands. And I realize that takes courage because, you know, the brand could, you know, go with someone who's a bit more compliant with their needs. So it's, I don't think there's a particularly easy answer.
It takes courage, but it also takes integrity from the client, right? To, you know, not go, well, you've said no, but I can find someone else who'll say yes. So absolutely. Corinne.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for that. I didn't want to interrupt, but I feel like, you know, the elephant in the room here is the client, right? And so we can have as many discussions as we like, and we can produce as great practice as we like, reformulate our whole, you know, professional processes. But if the client won't buy into them, then we are not going to instigate change, because almost everything we do, except for, you know, great work from people like John, for example, R&R, as it were, you know, is at the behest of clients. So for me, the big question is, how do we get, you know, how many clients are there in this room? None, I don't think. But, you know, so maybe a couple. But for me, it's like, as we go through this process, how do we include, involve, engage clients within this?
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you that Insights Association is including clients in our task force work. For the language guide, we actually had a group of half clients and half agency suppliers, and they helped us write the language. Now, there's not enough clients involved in the Insight. We have a ton of brands that are members, but there's not enough of them that are involved in the data quality work, and we're trying to engage them more. But I think you're completely right, and that's what I meant even about up and down the whole chain. Like, we all have to work together. They're also involved in our measurement program, and we ask them specific questions like, okay, if we gave you this metric as a buying signal, would you buy based on that? And if they say no, then we stop the work, right? Because why are we going to work on something that they're not going to use as a buying signal? And so you're right, and I know that the other agent associations have client sounding boards that they're using. I think it's important to still be able to have conversations like this without the client in the room, so you know, so we can be really transparent and you know, really say fuck a lot, right? But you're right, they have to be involved.
So yeah, let's move on to talk about clients a little bit. Are we being honest enough with our clients about the scale of the problem? And I take Deborah's point around we'll talk to them when we've got something to tell them, which is fine. But are we hiding this a little bit? Is it a bit of a dirty secret? And do we need to be more honest with clients, or is that not the way to go?
I think we need to be transparent with our audience about what we're doing and why we're doing it. I mean, I think that's why the vocabulary work is very, very important. Remember that a lot of clients are using self-serve these days, you know, so what's the distinction between researchers in the room and clients? They're the same sort of, so, you know, there's an angle there, I think. I think we need to be transparent about what we're doing. We need to also involve them more in being more demanding, probably. I mean, I've heard clients say, I don't care about this, this is your problem. I don't buy that, because particularly in the survey design aspect of it, they've definitely got a key role. So I think we should be open.
And I guess we need to empower them a bit more to know what questions do they need to ask, right? You know, so, you know, what is someone's quality control, and you know, like the ESOMAR 37 and the stuff that, you know, the professional standards is doing, you know, how, because not all clients, you know, have much research knowledge, and so we need to arm them with the vocabulary and with the right questions to ask, and also what does a good answer look like, right? So they know what they're doing. So moving back to kind of like, how do we solve it and why aren't we doing it? We know what we should be doing. We've had a lot of conversations around best practice and what the bodies are doing, you know, MRS and ESOMAR and Insights Association. Do you think that those professional bodies need to go further, in the sense that, you know, and Deborah gets asked this a lot, to take MRS as an example, there is a difference between best practice, which is advisory, and code of conduct, which is mandatory. And a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, we're suggesting it is best practice. Do we need to be going further and make some of these things, if not all, mandatory in terms of a code of conduct or equivalent legislation? Is that the way to go?
Before we answer that, I'd love to just show of hands from you guys, right? Because you're our members. How many of you think that there should be more code of conduct standards for sampling? Yeah, so then the answer
A lot.
is yes.
So Deborah
Right.
in front, a lot.
Yeah, so then, because I think so too, but I didn't want to say that, you know, without sort of getting the you know, because you're who we serve. And so I believe 100% that there should be, and we were talking earlier about when people make a car, there are standards of safety that must be followed. And then you differentiate on top of that standard of safety. I think there are standards of safety and research that we need to implement that need to be mandatory. And then you differentiate on top of that, and you no longer differentiate on a standard of safety.
So could you elaborate on what...
Sorry, I'm just because otherwise online might be...
Yeah, sorry. Could you just elaborate on what specifically standards in sampling would be, as opposed to standards for sample or standards for questions? Because you said standards for sampling, so it would be good to hear the specifics around that.
Yeah, I do think that there should be standards around security of links and security of access to surveys. I think that there should be some standards around the amount of transparency that you give to people when they think they're going to take a 5-minute survey versus a 15-minute survey and a 25-minute survey. There are best practices right now, but there are not standards, and they're not really quantified. I think that there should be standards around the metrics that you share with clients. How many 7-day active people do you really have in your panel? I think that there should be standards around those, and that they should be quality checked. So I could probably go on for a while, but there are a bunch of things that could be standardized around sample frame, the number of times they've taken surveys. There could be some standards that we would all have to agree on, and some of them might create a little discomfort, but I know we could agree on at least some basics of sample technology and of sample transparency.
And just before I hand the mic to Deborah, an ISO type standard or an inter-association standard, or both?
Well, I have a U.S. perspective on this. Nobody uses ISO in the U.S., right? So it's an issue. And not only does no one use ISO, but when they do get ISO certified, there's most clients don't buy on ISO. It's a specific U.S. problem. So I don't know that an ISO standard would work. I think it would have to be a membership standard.
From an MRS perspective, the code actually already requires you to be honest about time length Just letting you know that. For those of you, yeah, for those
Duty
who
of
not
care
doing
and
it.
the Respondent Duty of Care Act, right? It is in there.
It is. Yes.
Sorry, I was just saying, is it clear enough what honest about time means? Are we saying you should say the median length for completing the survey is X minutes, which is really clear, or saying it should take you about 5 minutes, which gives you a lot of wiggle room?
It's the former, really, but the wording's not quite as you say. But going back to the more general point, I think, is that the advantage of codes of conduct is that they are self-regulatory, which means they are created by us to regulate our sector. So we have the opportunity to do this together. And I think that's the most important thing, is if there's an agreement that we should be standardizing these things, making them mandatory within our codes, then we should be doing that. But what we can't have as a situation is introducing things, and lots of people are just saying we're just not going to follow that because we can't. And so we need to have an honest discussion about this. It is really, really important. I do think ISO and the ISO 22252 standard is part of the equation. It has more penetration in the UK. There's about 80 companies or so that has done it. And those standards are audited. So I think it's a combination of things. We've got the legislation, we've got GDPR, that's pretty tough already in terms of what we can and can't do. We have codes and guidelines and what we do with those, and then we have ISOs. And between those three things, we could create the standardized framework that we need to deliver the kind of quality measures that it seems that we're all agreeing that is needed.
The benefit of that is if there is, like somebody asked, if you were to raise your price, would clients buy it? And I don't remember what the answer was, but my mind immediately said, only if you could prove the quality. Like they need a quality buying signal. There needs to be something that they can say, oh, I'm going to pay. Their score on quality is 4 times higher, so I'm going to pay a little bit more. There's nothing like that for them to do right now. So they buy in a lemon market and hope that the data is going to be good. And 3 days later, when the car crashes and it's a lemon car, they're like, well, crap, maybe I should have paid more. They need to be able to make those decisions up front. And if we get some more framework in place and we get buying signals in place, then they'll pay more. They've said it time and time again that they would pay more if there was just a quality buying signal.
Thanks. So part statement, I guess, part question. So the one thing that we haven't talked about at all is social media data and search data and all these other data sources that modern marketers now, millennial marketers, are going to turn to because it's cheap and it's quick and it's easy. Has there been a bit of a race to the bottom for researchers to keep up with that trend? And instead, should we be reassuringly expensive? Should we have these codes of conduct to stand out against these new data sets that are here?
Anyone want to take that? Stephen, are you going to take that? Stephen, you look like you were about to
well,
breathe
I
or
mean, it's
speak.
a little bit out of my wheelhouse. I think in terms of should we be reassuringly expensive when it comes to the provision of respondents, I'm obviously all in favour of that. In terms of, but you know, again though, you know, there's always, whenever there's a standard, there's always going to be people who skirt around it, and they from a commercial perspective, you kind of, if you're playing a straight bat, as it were, then you're going to be looking at these people who are taking advantage by not playing the game, and that's going to, I don't know what issues that would cause, but I think the concept of having standards, and as long as people are willing to pay for it, needs to include, because Oscar would probably agree with me. We want to differentiate ourselves from Cint want to differentiate themselves from us, and Dynata and who else. So any kind of framework needs to leave room for differentiation between different suppliers. But I'm talking specifically about sample here. So I've probably got way off the track from your question, Ben.
I do think that we should be confidently selling the unique selling proposition of primary research. we should know what that unique selling proposition is, and then we should confidently sell against that, because there is a difference between that kind of scraped data and what you can do with primary, and they should live together. They should support each other. It's not a conference if Melanie doesn't say fit for purpose. There's a fit for purpose of each of those, but yes, we should be confidently selling against them and the uniqueness of what each of them can give, rather than trying to match the price or race to the bottom.
Judith, do you want to add anything to
Yeah, I
that?
was just thinking about your poser, if you like. I mean, it's very difficult to get things to change, right? It's difficult enough in a big agency to get change, yeah? And I mean, there may be other things that we can do. So, for example, we could try and develop a scoring system for what's a good questionnaire, yeah? Quite challenging, but I'm sure we could accomplish such a thing. And sort of if we throw that like a firecracker on the floor, what effect would that have? You know, sort of listening to John's presentation, and sort of if you were a client, you knew that the maximum score was 100 and you were scoring 50, you'd start to ask why, wouldn't you? So to set up a sort of like an internal market, if you like, for questionnaire excellence or something like that, that might have an effect. I mean, everybody would have to try and follow it. That would be a difficult part as well.
Yeah, and also, as John mentioned, I think John's left, hasn't he? We're name checking. Oh no, you are here, John. Okay. The other part of the puzzle is, of course, the feedback loop that John was talking about, and we've got to find a way of making that work. We talk about it a lot when it comes to changes we're trying to make in terms of, you know, ED&I and making our research more inclusive. You know, we kind of need that feedback loop to kind of be better. Again, Deborah will tell you that we have tried to kind of, you know, get that moving. Until now it's not been successful. It doesn't mean that it won't be and that we shouldn't try, as Deborah always says. But yes, kind of connecting the program and the researcher with the respondents a lot more, I think.
The question about the sort of the way that associations can actually help the industry in their role, because I spent most of my career working in agencies and looking at, and sort of, if you're working in an agency, you don't spend all your time thinking about associations, you know. I mean, sort of, my view previously, so now I've been enlightened, of course, but sort of was that associations there were for derogations, you know, to follow the code of conduct, to stay, you know, to keep yourself out of trouble, basically, and to stop the industry remit being curtailed. And that if associations were doing that, they were doing a very good job. Now you start to wonder whether, in the face of this kind of problem, they should start to be a little bit more assertive in what they're doing. And it kind of feels like that's the case.
I spent a long time in agencies, and I did feel alone. I would say, you know, you shouldn't be doing a survey that's more than 15 minutes, and you definitely, you know, but then there was no body behind me with a standard or a code of conduct or a best practice to say, this isn't Melanie's opinion, this is our profession's opinion. I talk to salespeople all over the place that say the same thing. I'll go stand up to them, but it's just me telling them no, and they'll find 100 other people that'll tell them they'll do it for them, and there's no standard or body that they can point to and say, I'm not the one saying don't do it this way. Your professional leaders are the one telling you don't do it this way. So I think that could have a huge impact.
My question is going to be about the hair on fire, Stephen.
Not mine, obviously.
We're talking about engagement, and we'll be talking about engagements forever, you know. And it is a problem, and it's not going to get better right away. But the problem is, like, at one point, fraud is going to be so good that we might be happy with the data, or, you know. Do we care? You know, like, I thought I was really happy we didn't talk about speeding and straight lining, especially if we get rid of the Likert scales. That's sorted. But I thought, like, you know, how are we going to detect, you know, the fact that an open-ended is going to be, you can use ChatGPT and say, write me a questionnaire about the vote for the next elections, 5 questions, and it's going to do it. You can ask it to have it in JSON, and then you can say, respond to that questionnaire pretending to be a Scottish Tory voter, and then you're going to see how good the open-ended questions, the responses are. And that's something that's going to happen right away, because we reward people, we pay them, and there will be people that will write those bots, not just Andrew and me, to make money. And we need to address that quickly. It's now.
Well, I can't speak of what the future is going to hold. I'm notoriously terrible at predicting the future, but I think when it comes to AI now, there's certain things that certainly PureSpectrum already have in place in terms of our data filters. For instance, you can tell if someone's cutting and pasting, if the if the active tab is turning to the second tab as somebody goes to look for answers elsewhere. You can ask emotive open ends, so you can do some analyzing the language of the open end to see, because typically AI can be more formal or verbose, contextual analysis as well. So there's a lot of sophisticated things you can do right now to ensure that AI isn't coming into your study. Your question about will that give us even better data in the future? Will AI give us even better data in the future? I hope not. But yeah, so we can. When it comes to data quality and fraud prevention, it's really just a constant cat and mouse game. We try and stay one step ahead of them. They're trying to stay one step ahead of us. AI right now is still in its infancy, but in 5 years' time, who knows how we're going to combat it.
We can, and I think you will, have an entire session on AI, the legal risks, the
Next conference, get your
privacy
tickets
risks,
now,
next
people.
conference, right? So, the bottom line, though, for me anyway, Melanie's point of view here is that AI will still need to be rooted in the way people are currently feeling and acting and moving. And so it will still need to be rooted in really good underlying data. And it will most often be in a sandbox that people are using so that they can control their own proprietary data. And so we're all going to still need to have the foundations of really good research to inform the data sets that the AI and the machine learning are using. That's Melanie's point of view.
And I think it's a really interesting point. And Katie O'Connor at Zappi was saying this, at lunchtime when we were chatting and suggesting that potentially we should be leaning in more to synthetic respondents, and it might give us something. But I've got a couple more questions. So we'll just go to Pete.
I was going to step back to the issue of the client involvement in the process and the questionnaire. And I always used to say to people, like when I go get my car fixed, I don't tell the mechanic what spanners to use. And that's what I used to think about the client being involved. But I have to say that I don't think our spanners are very good anymore. And in the absence of any textbook training standards, I think it is time for the associations to step into that space that Judith identified that they'd never been to before. But that would require the membership, I think, to endorse that. And I think they would be open to it. And that would be the point at which you could turn to your client and say, this is the best practice. And then I think we can go forward from there. So not a question, actually.
I know someone who's on the operations side, and we program surveys. It's a lifesaver when I can say to a client, we are not allowed to do that, because code says that we're not. It ends conversations quickly.
Thanks. I'm just going to say I don't think clients are quite as naive as you think they are. I think the clients have a set of business objectives that they're measuring, and if the data comes back from the research and it doesn't match, they're going to change the suppliers and they're going to change what's going on. And they've got a whole range of internal people doing UX research, they're doing website development, they're doing a whole range of things that you're not involved in. So when we talk about questionnaire design and what's good quality practice, well, there's units in Barcelona at the moment which will tell you exactly what questions work and what questions don't work, and they do small tests here and there with NetQuest and stuff. It's not that the internal client will actually turn off you if you don't provide the right data, because they can match it to A/B testing and other forms of testing, and if your surveys don't provide it, they just won't use them.
Any thoughts on that?
I don't think we're suggesting that clients are naive. I mean, but you must acknowledge that clients in some case are asking for these questionnaires that we know aren't working very well. And so we're not having that debate with them, perhaps? Yeah. Yeah. What's a good question?
No, not what's a good question, but how's it react on the screen. So,
Would you mind repeating that?
yeah, so there's a whole issue not about what's a good question, but when you put a question on a screen, on a device, you look at what TikTok does, you look at how people use their devices. They don't use their devices just selecting from questions. So my example previously was, if you take a questionnaire, a standard market research one, to people who are experienced in forms for instance, insurance collection, where they have a form which they know they have to get through very, very fast, they have completely different design standards as to how those questions work to get people through them as fast as possible so that they can get to give them a quote. And that type of design style is very different from just how do we ask questions.
I completely agree with you. And so sort of my point about squashing sort of conventional brand tracker questionnaires into an online mobile format, screen format, hasn't worked very successfully in some cases. And sort of we're in competition with the digital world. So when swiping came in, Tinder, yeah? So we looked at, in my previous agency, we looked at Tinder and thought, that's quite good. We're going to use that for innovation research, yeah? I like it, I don't like it, I don't like it, yeah? And sort of like, there's all this activity going on, I have no doubt. There's no discipline that's come up in the market research industry to say, we're going to share, this works, this is happening. Even the look and feel in terms of, does it look flat, does it look vibrant, all this kind of stuff is the environment that we're in. And we're not really responding to it in a very dynamic way. I think in some respects we're quite an old-fashioned industry there. I can see Deborah's gasping to say something. No.
Sorry, I just want to I think that's a really interesting conversation, and do stay for drinks because there's a paid bar. JT hadn't mentioned it, but just we've only got 5 minutes left, so I just very quickly wanted to ask, obviously you guys, but to everyone, what have we missed today? Is there anything that we have missed? Is there anything that you kind of should have been mentioned that hasn't been mentioned? You know, let's fill that now, or have we covered every element that you think we should have done? Or to anyone, was there anything that you were thinking, I thought this would come up, you know, and kind of hasn't?
Stuff that you hide.
No, we had that.
Yeah, Dean
we had
mentioned
that. You weren't paying attention, Joanne. Sorry, I saw a hand.
Yeah, potentially controversial, I don't know. My feeling is there's a lot of rent seeking that doesn't add any value in the supply chain. So we had an example earlier of one panel recruiting from another panel. I don't know, it just feels like in the sample ecosystem as a whole, there's a whole lot of people who don't really add a lot of value upstream that, you know, like any kind of digitized economy, are just rent seeking, extracting money where they can from the supply chain with no value proposition behind them. Yeah, just
for the US person in the room who doesn't
landlordism, or I guess, you know, taking value out of the supply chain without really offering anything that enhances that supply chain.
Ray's gonna. God, I'm getting fit here.
We'll bring jogging in next time. Something like 60-70% of all surveys that are done are not done by people who work in agencies, panel companies, or insight departments. They're done outside that. They're using Momentum and all these other things, and Courtright and Forster and lots of brilliant platforms. What are we going to do that's going to improve the quality of those, or highlight that our quality is different?
Great questions. Well, I've got an illustrious panel.
Well, a lot of the ones that you just mentioned are actually members of the Insights Association and the MRS and others, Qualtrics, Forsta, like they're active. They do a lot of. So
do you mean DIY? Self-serve. Sorry.
Yeah.
Self-serve.
Yeah. I mean, so I think the answer is we have to create these standards, and they have to get implemented into the platforms that they're using, and the platforms have to be able to guide them, put the mind of the researcher into the platform. and the standards of the profession into the platform, and then lots of education. You know, and I kind of wanted to go back, you know, I feel like you might have wanted a response, sir, who said rent taking. You know, I do believe that there's a problem with vertical integration in our profession. And that problem, it really shows itself when, like, the people that are making the panel are not fully able to control the experience that their people get when they go up and down the food chain. I will say that we love all members, and we want all of our members to be active and participating members. So there's no layer that the Insights Association is suggesting taking out, of course. But I do think that we need much stronger collaboration up and down that, and that if they're going to be a part of the supply chain, they need to be adding real value and not just taking rent.
To be totally clear, I'm not accusing the
I know.
exchanges of that.
I know. I just have to be careful. And I just have to be a little careful what I say,
We're just,
because they're
for
my
those
members,
online, we're
but-
just clarifying that we are not accusing the panels of
doing
that.
anything,
Or the
yeah.
exchanges, sorry, the exchange.
But we are saying your point is right, and if they're going to be a part of the ecosystem, they should be adding value to these conversations, and they should not just be taking rent.
Corinne.
Yeah, a question for the panel. I mean, thoughts about, given we're talking about survey quality at the end of the day, or data quality, let's say, what are your thoughts about the other side of the coin to respondent engagement, which is the amount of incentive we pay online panelists? So if we really want good quality data, should we be paying more?
Well, I think. Oh, sorry.
No, carry on.
I think market forces generally lead the agenda there. You know, if clients were willing to pay more, that goes through the whole supply chain. But there has been a race to the bottom. I got into the sample sector quite late, and you know the stories of £5 CPIs for a consumer study, which I don't think we're ever going to see those days again. So there has been a continual squeeze on price, and unfortunately, that squeeze has persisted through incentive payments. Now, I take the point that people who take these surveys are the lifeblood of this industry, and we should be rewarding them. But ultimately, if the client isn't willing to pay, because again, there'll always be someone who can do it at a lower price, then it just goes back to Mel's point about we need to have collaboration throughout the top and bottom and across the industry. So to make sure that we can avoid further erosion.
In the global collaboration, the Research Society out of Australia is taking on this specific question. So we're, but I think as a profession, we're missing some big opportunities to think outside of the dollar. There are a lot of reasons people will take a survey. If it's fun, if we made it fun again, people will take it just because it's enjoyable. They do it to get back, to give back, and to get a pat on the back. Those are the reasons people take surveys. They can get back through money or through the experience or content. Tell them the results. Like, there are lots of ways to get back, to give back messaging around. They just want to give back to the products and brands that they love, and we don't talk about that anymore. And then they want to be an expert, to get a pat on the back. They want thank you. Your contributions here made a difference, and we value your expert opinion. Well, there are so many things that we could do that are not just the dollar, and if we would think more broadly about that. But that's the question that the Research Society's workstream out of Australia will answer as part of the Global Coalition.
Can I just come back to your question about sort of what are we missing? For me, we're missing serious discussion about execution. How can we get these things to happen? What do we want to happen? How can we get them to happen in an effective way? And that's the really tricky part. I mean, anyone can say what's wrong with anything, but how you actually get it to change is really the heart of the matter. Maybe that's the next conference meeting that you have.
Yeah.
But I hope it's by everybody in this room joining one of these work streams and actually committing their company's priorities to making to adoption of the standards and adoption of the best practices.
Absolutely. We are out of time. I know that Stephen and Mel at least are staying for a drink. So if you do have other questions, I'm sure they'll be willing to take them. So just a huge thank you to all of you and for all those brilliant questions. So thanks to the panel. So I'm going to hand over to JT, who's going to do a little wrap up of the day, and I'm sure he'll do lots of thank yous. So just before I give up my microphone because I know he won't mention himself. I just want to have a big round of applause and a big thank you to JT, who has made a monumental effort today. So thank you.
So, a couple of things from me. I'm going to leave this on the screen during some words now. I don't think there's any Likert scale. Compliant and it's well optimised. Please do take our survey. We obviously love surveys, but it's really helpful for us to get feedback from you, key members of our community that we now serve as the ASC. So a few thoughts from me and some housekeeping before we wrap up at probably just before past. The bar is ready for us to go and get a quick drink. Killer things from me today was 66% failure as industry. John, that's a fantastic statistic that really sets context for other industries that we may serve as researchers. It wouldn't work in engineering. It wouldn't work in many of the businesses that we serve as CPGs, and really was like, wow, okay, that's an insight for me. I am kind of overwhelmed by the amount of openness and willingness to discuss the issue today. I do think we're at a turning point in the industry. I think with the governing bodies that I've worked with and seen with globaldataquality.org, which I shall have tattooed somewhere shortly. Snappy, well done, guys. We should all go and visit that website. I really do feel that things are changing for us. We've got to take initiative, and it's people in this room, the businesses that we work for, and the clients that we serve. I don't think there's too many clients in the room, but we have to do something here. Otherwise, our industries, can I be honest, are quite frankly screwed. And I love what I do. I don't want it to be screwed. So please do something, and let's fix it, from panel quality to the technology that we use. I learned loads on server to server. That's fascinating. Just the basics, guys. I heard about the best good quality surveys, and the presentations were fantastic. Just a real eye-opener. So thank you for everyone that got involved there. I heard some really interesting snippets talking to people. Some of them were like me, asking them what they thought. Anyone got any views? And there's a couple of people I asked for some views earlier about today, what it's meant to them, or things they might do differently, or ideas for this event coming up. They're all going to be a bit shy now. Any hands? No? Oh, I have somebody. No? Oh, I've got one at the back. Thank you. Did I prime you? I think I might have done, actually. Terrible research.
You did prime me. I'll give you away. I think it was really helpful for me to see the breakdown of the problem and to really lay it out so that everyone in this room, I think we all work in different areas, and to be able to see it broken down and to start having a common terminology that we can go back to our businesses and start to share that with others and actually start tackling it piecemeal, because I'm feeling equal parts excited to help solve these problems, but also terrified at the scale of it. So being able to see it in some bite-sized chunks is really valuable.
Thank you. Anyone else got any other comments about the day?
I just wanted to say I really enjoyed how everything was presented, and there was useful information just throughout, and a lot of it was immediately applicable. I can go back and talk to people in my workplace and do things, basically.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Another JT plant. I've been coming to these conferences since 2003, or actually attending market research conferences since 2003, and we've talked about the same issues over and over and over again, and some of us have like jokingly laughed about the fact that we tend to talk about the same topics and talk them to death. What I'm impressed with about this particular conference is that everyone is coming to the table together to collaborate, and it's time to take action. So I agree, it's time to get involved and take action now, so that we can stop talking things to death and start actually activating. And that respondents should also be part of that process. Not just what we know about respondents from what we do in surveys, but also respondents that are actually on panels that we can talk to and kind of get involved as well, because they are part of the ecosystem that we're trying to create. So we need them as part of that, as well.
John.
I was wondering whether I like the idea of these little intervening little sessions and running some sort of hackathon type thing. I was wondering whether we could organise a survey design competition with a brief. Here's a survey, make it look great. and put everyone, because I think that there's one of the things we haven't talked about, actually, I was talking about missing things, is the survey technology is not geared up visually. When I open up PowerPoint and I click the template for an intro, it has a placeholder for an image. Why don't I get that when I open up a survey design software, asking me, well, what image, and give me an option to sort of press a button to control the layout and design. And that's a missing element, I think, in some of the thinking. The technology to enable researchers to create more beautiful surveys is something I would definitely encourage.
And if you look at PowerPoint, it has the slide designer right now. It's going to have Copilot shortly. It's coming. These things need to happen in our industry too. Thanks for the feedback.